Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Happy Martin Luther King Day. I am Faith Suggs, one of your co-hosts for Faith Family Focus, former Duke Women's Basketball graduate and current CEO and founder of Brand by Faith and marketing manager for SIG Sports. And this wonderful man next to me is my father, Schaefer Suggs, former NFL player with the New York Jets and the Cincinnati Bengals, and has also served as VP and on the executive board for the NFLPA Chicago, also known as the RPFPC, as its charitable arm. Good morning, Dad. How are you?
Good morning, Faith. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
It's a little rainy.
We have a rainy day here too.
A rainy day.
Right, have a lot to talk about. Great games yesterday in the playoffs. They're all really, really great games. I really enjoy watching them.
So now that is that the final wild card games? They're done, right?
Yeah. Well, we have one more wild card game tonight. Tampa Bay against Dallas.
Okay.
Determined. Yeah. So, the two teams that get byes were the AFC and NFC champions, not champions, but leaders were Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles.
I consider those champions. That's how we would do it in the NBA and all the other conferences that we would and leagues, but not surprised by the Kansas City Chiefs at all. We already knew how that was going to go. They were a little shit in the beginning, but of course, Patrick Mahomes is one of a kind. Very interested to see Tampa Bay Buccaneers this evening, because they have had an emotional season. One team, however, that I know New York fans are ecstatic about from yesterday, the New York Giants, finally making some movement.
Well, so, neither one of the New York teams have been in the playoffs for some time. The Giants have been in the playoffs for 12 years, so it's kind of nice, and they played well. Of course, your Duke graduate, Daniel Jones, is playing extremely well. Actually, he set an NFL record yesterday. So I hope that they continue on. They'll end up playing the Eagles next week. Eagles are a really good football team. So
I want to find the picture they posted yesterday of Daniel Jones on the New York Giants Instagram page. It's gonna make you chuckle. They because all those teams now, they use the chains to commemorate if you made a record or something like that. And so they have them with the theme change. Have you seen those lately?
Yeah.
After a win, they hand out, if you're the player of the game, they hand out a chain that's customized, and they pass it around every time to the player of the game. So it used to be, remember, ball of the game, they give you get a game ball. Now it's the chain.
Seminoles, Florida State started that with Tion. Yeah.
I thought Miami also had stake in that.
Actually, you're right. It was Miami that started that. Defensive player make a big play, come on and chain.
Yeah.
But
I want to see, because you know what? That started more and more and more is those post-game pictures of them with the chains.
Well, you continue with that. It's going to be there's a lot more parity in the league this year. I mean, Buffalo almost got beat by Miami. Miami was one play away from that game in overtime. The Cincinnati Ravens game was really good. Of course, Lamar Jackson didn't play, and they still played very, very well. The Bengals could be a team to beat. The Bengals Buffalo game next week is going to be a really good football game.
I want to know what you think before we dive into that about the Lamar Jackson injury, and his decision to not play.
Well, he has his own reasons. It's something that you feel that it's suspect. If he's injured, he's injured. Is it contractual? I'm not really sure. Did he ever sign his contract? So I'm not really sure, Faith.
I believe I don't think you can be out there without a contract. So I don't think that was the issue. But I do want, before you speak from an old timer's point of view, I want to point this out to you, because you already started the sentence off confusing for me. Robert Griffin III posted this yesterday on his Twitter. Said, "This is why you don't put a brace on it and play. played with no ACL, NCL for my brother's teams. My brothers and my team changed the trajectory of my career. Hindsight is 2020. I didn't have the luxury of that. Lamar does. He's doing the right thing.
Yeah. So very, very good point. And he puts in perspective because, that mentality of playing through with the amount of money and that jeopardizes his career is a smart thing. So
Absolutely. And you know what I also think? Oh, I'm sorry. I also think, where did that go? There you go. I also think it's okay. You know what I mean? Like, if I have invested, of course, we don't know where Lamar Jackson's going to play next year, right? That's also something that people are having conversations about. So there could be more to it, right? There's the injury piece to it. There's also the piece that, we don't know what's going on amongst the program and the organization.
Right.
But I do agree that, especially for a wild card game, he goes and plays. Let's say he goes out there, they win. But anybody that knows, the more you play on injury, especially knees, they don't exactly get better, right? They continue to deteriorate with time, with more work, with more time on your feet. The only time to actually heal a knee injury is rest. So I think that, or whatever it is, whatever Lamar's issue is, the injury itself is not going to get better without rest.
There's no issue with Lamar Jackson. He's injured. He has torn ACL, and he chooses not to jeopardize his career.
Why is it even a question then?
Right, exactly. There's no issue.
That's my wondering is why were people having that? Why were people providing their? Maybe it was fan base, but I doubt it was fans.
Yeah, no, that's
a little more my confusion is I don't understand.
You being an athlete, me being an athlete, it historically, you have very dear friends that continue.
Oh no, it's a PCL grade 2 sprain.
Right.
Well, it's close to a grade 3 level injury that's unstable.
Right. So what that could do is lead to a worse injury. So it's not for us to question. It's not for us to question. He's making the decision. I'm pretty certain that the organization is going to have to stand behind it because he's one of the best football players that ever played.
They can stand behind it, and they may not have Lamar Jackson in purple and black next year.
Okay, there's a team in New York called the Jets. We need somebody like that. There's a team. There's a whole bunch of teams that will line up to take Lamar Jackson and see his value, see his worth, in the way he played. So no.
I just wanted to know your perspective on that because RG3 tweeted that last night, and it was all over. Social media, ESPN. I'm sure they're talking about it right now on First Take with Stephen A. Smith and them. So I know this is going to be a conversation amongst us for a while. Again, I don't know why, because we went back to a year ago, Dad. Let's rewind to when seniors were deciding not to play in the bowl games. And it was just like this. And they didn't even have injuries, so people couldn't comprehend. I said, there's a long-term process to this league. And if we didn't learn anything from a week and a half ago with that young man having to get CPR on that football field, we got to understand with a player, NFL is different than NBA. You got to play different. You got to play in your career different. It's just a different league.
Right. There's a certain, because I am my age, I played at a time where that wasn't even, there wasn't even a concern in terms of how much they care about players' health and safety, right? And now to be a father of a football player, I've come full circle. And you're going to have always a certain segment of the population that is either they are uneducated or they're just simply ignorant in terms of, or biased in terms of their opinions on whether or not these players should play. And to make comments like, well, this is what they sign up for. It's part of the job, right? The level of insensitivity that exists has always been there, but now that the players are a lot more outspoken, a lot of players are not, they have a voice. As we got to talk a little bit about cancel culture, so we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's what happens. There's a certain population that just don't really want to understand. As an athlete, like I said last week, as an athlete, and I know that how many conversations your dad had over this last 2 weeks about that happened, and the fact that my last play with the Jets, I actually was taken out on a stretcher like that with a partial punctured lung, and and to be honest with you, that was my last play with the New York Jets. So that's how quick your life can change. And so for Lamar to say, listen,
it's not worth it. I'm good. It's okay.
yeah.
Hey, I'll see you guys next year. It's a spring. It's okay.
Right.
It is
So
okay. It's so funny how injury is always tossed up for discussion.
right. And well, it depends.
Always, no matter what, no matter what.
It depends on who gets injured. Okay.
That's not true.
Okay.
That's not true. Because, Anthony Davis, that's true. Because Anthony Davis continuously gets hurt. And I told people this, they don't understand why does Anthony Davis and Los Angeles Lakers always hurt. I said, did you see his body? Do you see how tall he is? People that big, Shaq doesn't exist. Okay, let's be real. Shaquille O'Neal is a superpower human being. Like he doesn't exist, right? He was a gift from God. Shaquille O'Neal going his whole career, being able to be as explosive he was, being able to be as dominating as he was, with very few injuries is amazing. Anthony Davis being that tall, being that it's sometimes coordination, sometimes things aren't just supposed to work out. So
what do you think
for
about
Anthony Davis?
Zion Williamson?
He gets hurt. It's like
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
for I think it's funny because even when we see LeBron James get injured, people are like, "Oh, LeBron's not tough enough. Michael Jordan would never." Well, Michael Jordan and LeBron James aren't playing in the same era, right? One, and also LeBron James is a completely different person than Michael Jordan.
Right.
Because if we want to say Michael Jordan was all dotting our I's and crossing our T's, we got to be careful with that one too. So it's just funny to watch how injury is always tossed up to the wind for discussion by people who it's not their injury.
It's not their injury. It's not, they don't understand it. So yeah, I get it. No, so thank you for sharing that. I mean, I know we have a lot to talk about. I really want to dive into the importance of today, and maybe we'll kind of lead that discussion. But thank you for sharing your perspective on that, because it is important.
Also, I didn't tell you this, but the NFL front offices had to go through inclusion hiring training recently. Do you know what that is? Like they had to go through basically, bias training and all of that to try to check their unintentional biases that are built over time at the door as we head into this off season. And it's going to be very interesting how that impacts the demographic makeup of coaches in a league that has predominantly always been a white male league. Even though we've had 3 years now where we've had this conversation. So I'm interested. I really don't know. What exactly are they looking for? What are they reaching for? What are they hoping for? What's the percentage? All of these things. I'm just very intrigued to see.
Well, so that segues us, okay? We have many discussions, but I have a dream. Have we been to the mountaintop? Have we arrived? And the answer is what? No.
Have we arrived?
No. And then what happens, Faith? What happens? I had a discussion yesterday. What happens is unfortunately, there's a pace by which we are forcing this narrative. We have to slow down. We speed up. We slow down after not the Rodney King, but the George Floyd thing, incident.
Yeah.
It was a narrative. Now people are not wanting to hear it again, right? And that's not what Dr. Martin Luther King stood for. We have to continue to strive and continue to push this narrative. So ironically, you talk about the inclusion with the NFL. My history, playing up in the 70s, and then also being around guys who played in the 50s and the 60s. The difference in the exclusion, not only in the game, but exclusion in who sits where in the bus, who rooms with who, the exclusion in terms of what positions that you play. Now it's the exclusion in what jobs you get, who's head coach, who's general manager, who's the owner, right? Exclusion. The NFL has a long way to go in terms of that. When we talk about cancel culture,
Mm-hmm.
we'll get into that, and how a league, in sense, the NBA, right? People, I don't watch the NBA anymore, right?
Because they're
Because
typically what we want to emulate as a nation is the right way to handle the sensitive time
right,
that we're in.
so
Yes.
we'll pivot into that. Make sure we talk about that. But so we have
100%.
a lot to talk about today. But if you want to start off this topic, because Dr. Martin Luther King was a big part of my life growing up, in the late '60s, and the day that he was assassinated was a really, really sad day for me. I told you, I think I shared this story. I'll share it really quick. Is I got a chance. My mom took me to South Bend, Indiana, just for a chance to have a look to see if we could even see him. He was speaking at the Steffen Center in South Bend, and I got a chance to see him get out of his car, and they walked into the building. And to me, the more I share that story, the more I can't believe that I've had that many years behind me, that I had the opportunity to be a part of that history, and then watching his dream unfold, because we have made a significant amount of progress, but if he was still here today, he would have the pedal. He would have his foot on that pedal. Okay, there was never, and that's probably what got him assassinated, because he did not take his foot off the pedal. And it came to equal rights and bringing awareness to the unjust, bringing awareness to the world, not just. That's why he won the Nobel Peace Prize, bringing awareness to what was going on in our country in the '60s, in the '50s, and the '60s. And that he was only 36 years old. That's what blows me away, how young he was.
Yeah.
And it just blows me away, how young he was. You hear some of his speeches. Sometimes as I get older, I cannot believe that a man, probably one of the greatest men in our history of our world, of our country, had that much significance in our world. And so that's why we have to honor this day, and just pay tribute to. He is the reason that we have made so much progress, because we always got to remember what his dream was.
Yeah. I want to share my screen real quick, because one of the things I like to do every Martin Luther King Day is to not share black and white photos. And the reasoning behind that is because we know this as a country, and this is something we have corrected about history, is we have a problem with rewriting historical context, whether it's the Holocaust, whether it's the civil rights movements, whether it's any moment in the past 50 years. It's so hard to say that, 60 years, because we're already in 2023, sharing those moments in black and white when those moments were very much documented in color. But the reason why they do that is they want to make it seem like it was further back in time, so that we don't, because so that we think, as we're educating our next generation, they think, oh, that was so long ago, so we're so much better now, right? And that's something that is very much, if you go and look at the school books that I had compared to the school books the young children have now, the black and white versus the color photos are evident, right? Because that was a actual thing they wanted to do. They did not want to keep reminding people that hatred and struggle had happened just yesterday, right? But unfortunately, it did, right? And so one of the things I'd like to share is, whenever they have these threads of Martin Luther King, and they have him in photo, can you see?
Yes, very well.
And the children of him as a dad.
These are wonderful pictures.
Right? And have you ever seen these before?
Yeah, actually, you actually touched on that last year, bringing these in color. These are beautiful, beautiful part pictures. And as you shared that with me, and then the part about making it seem like it happened so long ago. So why people are so uncomfortable with critical thinking theory, right? The reality of this is part of our history. And all we're asking people is to understand that it's part of our history. We're not saying to people, you know, we're going to the backlash is about what you're doing today. This is part of our history. It gives you an opportunity to understand why people think the way they think.
Yeah.
And so thank you for sharing that.
This is one of my favorites, and I can't find the rest of them
Mm-hmm.
where he's on vacation. I think they were in Costa Rica. And there's pictures of him and Coretta in like these beautiful colors. Or maybe it was Cuba. It was something.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in these beautiful colors. And we would have never seen these photos because we just haven't taught history that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just Martin Luther King. It's big historical moments in that time period. There's photos out there that we just may never see.
Yeah.
Of
Well,
those.
I think we will see them as we continue to have these types of conversations. And when, I've been talking a lot about Generation Z, right?
Mhm.
Generation Z is bringing to light a lot of what they stand for. And a part of that is understanding history, understanding that, and understanding why it's important to have inclusion, why it's important, right? So, yeah, this is great.
No, yeah, but I wanted to I do this every year just because I want to lean into creating these wonderful narratives around history. And I think that one of the things you best teach historical moments, good and bad, with actual proof and evidence and truthful information.
And it's hard for people to look at some pictures. It's hard.
It reminds them that it was just yesterday.
Yes, yeah, it's hard, but it was a part of our history, right? And so, yeah, no, thanks for sharing that.
But a little bit about, I wanted to also say, because he just died in 1968, and while we're starting to get further and further away from that as we enter 2023, it's not that long ago, right? There's over 70% of the earth probably that was on the earth at the same time as Martin Luther King.
70% of the population that was on Earth?
Yeah, think about it. 1968, he was assassinated. It's only 2023.
Right.
If you do the math, 78, 88, 98, 08, 18, it's around 50 plus years, 53, 54.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no.
There's people that experienced that moment in society. And I think that is such a beautiful thing because we still have these stories. And as people get older, they're going to continue to tell and share them and pass them down. And so his legacy will always stay, because that's another thing we want to talk about is the legacy of the man. But one of the biggest things I wanted to say is there is no Martin Luther King legacy without Malcolm X.
Very well put.
Because there is no forward movement without peaceful but yet assertive protest.
Right.
Right? And I think that that's something that we are starting to really see post George Floyd, is that there's no more just, peaceful. It's more, and we're not talking about looting. That's not what we're talking about, right? What we're talking about is assertiveness. It's holding people accountable. It's having hard conversations. It's telling people exactly what they are to their face so that there's no sugarcoating the issues. And I think that because those two, if they come hand in hand at the same time in history, you understand why both had to be there at the same time. Because at the end of the day, authority does not always respect peace.
Well,
because that was the case.
Share something with you here. You had three things going on at that time. You had the importance of the civil disobedience and the nonviolent protest. You had Malcolm X, which completely brought awareness and pride to who we are. But then you also have the Black Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
You had that really radical movement. So the culmination of all three of those at the same time, running simultaneously, was a tremendous impact on our history.
100%. You know, as you look back on Black history and overall the fight for equality and equity in this country for all people, you can't ever help but see there's multiple narratives within every movement.
Yeah.
Every movement has multiple narratives, right? Multiple different avenues of protest.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And it even goes back to Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois.
Mm-hmm.
Two completely different perspectives, right? Two overall very different goals, right? Very similar to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and how they were seeing things. And because of the perspectives and the spaces they were coming from, right? Martin Luther King came from the South, Malcolm X came from the North, right? Very two different perspectives. You have always seen that there's multiple avenues to protest, to movement in our history, in our society.
Right.
And so what you know is that without one, you can't have, like, one can't survive without the other. There is no respect towards peaceful protests. What caused the peaceful protests to be so monumental, so influential was what? One, the magnitude of the people that gathered, but what else?
The violence against them.
The violence against them, the sacrifice of their pure, honestly, life, quality of life, the danger that they put themselves in.
And it was, and you were actually able to see it. Yeah, you were able to see it, you know?
Right. And Malcolm X was more, well, I don't exactly want to get my butt beat, but I do want to enforce in some sort of way. So he went a different way, right? And that there's, of course, why is it that when we're taught this piece of history, we're taught this one versus the other?
No, it's not a verse.
In the same textbooks that it's black and white, it's taught one versus the other. And while we have 2 pages of Martin Luther King, we've got a half a page of Malcolm X, because it's not ideal to teach Malcolm X's way of life because it was feared in some sort of way, right? He painted it as
this was less understood. So the Black Panthers had way more influence. You really have to continue to keep them in that conversation, because they had way more influence in terms of how you had differentiate between the 3 movements, right? Yeah. And you needed that. And unfortunately, it led to the riots. It led to the radical, very, very, unfortunately, it did, right? And then you had more. Yes, exactly. So you saw it. But those 3 movements coexisted at the same time, and they were very, very, very impactful. Very impactful.
It's also very interesting to see how, and this is going to be so crazy, but I want people to really understand the perspective of the people around Martin Luther King, right? The people that we were taught, I'm trying to teach you, my generation was taught to think was bad, to think was, this is not the right way to protest. This is not the right way. And it was like, at the end of the day, unless Martin Luther King was assassinated, his legacy, we don't know where it was going to go, right? Let's have a very real conversation. His sacrifice, his life, his short-term time on life, leading the March on Washington, the many speeches, the amazing churches he overwhelmed with his voice, right? All those mission statements, all those things, would we really hear them in 2023? Violence, unfortunately, had to happen. A sacrifice had to happen. We had to watch this unjust, this unfair moment in history in order for us to actually wake up and be like, oh my gosh, there's something going on. And it was like, yeah. But it's like, what if, right? And that's what we're trying to do today. What the words we say today, the marches we have today, the panels, the books, the movies, all those things, it's trying to voice it in an assertive way so that we can actually make change happen without sacrifice having to happen. And I think that is the legacy of Martin Luther King, is his voice, his speeches, his presence, everything he did as a man, right? But the fact that he went to the very end with a consistent message, even though he started to change up a little bit at the end, but a consistent message is I mean, his life being as short as it was, and to be someone who constantly wakes up in the morning not knowing if they're going to be able to go to bed at night, that is something that you look up to. That's something that you respect. That's something that you understand, because unfortunately, he was the symbol of discrimination and violence on the Black community.
Well, I would say violence is a result of society trying to suppress that movement and trying to suppress his voice. In all three cases, that's where violence came from. It's a suppression, trying to silence it. And that continues to happen.
Yeah, it continues to happen.
Because he's such and the way he did the civil disobedience and the nonviolent protests was just, and then being able to see it throughout the whole world. That constant media gave, if the media the way it was today, think about the media was very, very different back in those days, but you still saw the water hose, you still saw the beating, you still saw all of that, the dogs, you still saw it. And so no,
in today's society, though, we don't have to see we don't have to see violence inflicted on protesters in order for us to get the message across, right? Because if we ever, right, this generation, if we ever saw a human being get attacked by a dog, that whole police force is up and they're up. They have to go in for meetings. Okay, I don't know if they'll be dismissed, but they have to go for meetings, right? But I think because of social media, it has changed how we protest, right? We can sign petitions over social media now. That goes, you know what I mean? Like, we don't have to be in person. We don't know. We can now go on websites and they have 700 petitions for 700 different causes. And you can go in and just sign them all, right? And try to make a difference. So I think that his legacy, in terms of, one of it is sacrifice, right? And the belief in something greater and something better, even though it's not guaranteed. I think that's the biggest piece as well. And I think that's just what we all hope, and that's what we all were built to learn from as we were taught Martin Luther King's legacy in Black and White. And I also think that, like I said, I don't think one can rise without the other. I think there has to be peaceful protest, and I think there also has to be assertiveness and demanding an honest conversation about why change needs to happen, right? And people need to be almost to a point where, like, oh my goodness, people, this community, this religion, this group is fed up, right? And in order for that to happen, those honest conversations have to be heard and broadcasted, and that's the greatness of social media. So, no, I think it's a very important day. I want to remind people to go look at the pictures of Martin Luther King in color. They're actually really cool, and very, very beautiful. I'm shook that they were teaching us those pictures in black and white. Why would I want to see these pictures in black and white? I thought Martin Luther King, here's the craziest thing. I grew up, so I'm in school. I was born in 1997. That's fairly young, right? Devin was born in 2001. The both of us were raised on basically the same textbooks of Martin Luther King in black and white. But we went home to photos you had of your family in color. And we never put two and two together to understand the perspective on that. We got to teach history the right way, because then we're doing history justice. Then we're doing legacies justice. Then we're doing the future justice.
But it'll allow people to better understand us, each other, across the board, collectively, open up your lens. If you only grow up seeing a certain thing, you're only going to think and say a certain thing. And the divisiveness that has happened over the last 2 or 3 years is a result of that.
I was blessed enough to take a class that studied the relationship between, it was called Black Masculinity in American Society. So we studied people like Joe Johnson. We studied people like Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X. We never studied Martin Luther King.
Interesting.
We studied men that threatened the idea of a Black man in society, and what they challenged the acceptive narrative, right? Joe Johnson, right? Why was he challenging? Because he was fighting white fighters and winning, right? And then he would put his fur coat on and get in his fancy car with white women, and he would go into his house in a white neighborhood, and he did not care, right? And that was seen as, out of step. It wasn't allowed at the time that he was on earth, right? Like, he was in taboo. He should have been killed for that, right? But because of who he was as an athlete, he was able to kind of separate himself from the general public. And then we talked about Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, blood brothers. There's a book called Blood Brothers on their relationship, right? And how their relationship caused the CIA, the FBI, the Congress, the executive branch, the judicial branch, everybody to go up in arms about, oh my goodness, this is a partnership that is going to ruin the United States government. And so they tapped their phone calls. They sent mysterious letters. They tracked them across the country. All of those things. So we were able to study these men, right? That in a way challenged the narrative they were living in. And it was very interesting about the men we did not learn about. Even though Martin Luther King challenged, right, society, he at the end of the day didn't challenge like Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, the men who decided, well, I'm not going to war because I don't believe in a war and fighting for a country that does not fight for me, right? There's so many levels to this. So to be able to read the book Blood Brothers and be able to get an inside perspective on the thought process of men and women who rejected and were just like, no, I'm not okay with how society is. I'm not okay with how we're being treated. And their thought process and the things they would do and how strategic they would get with things. And it's just beautiful how history can be taught. And imagine this. What if we made Blood Brothers a required book to read in curriculums in your senior year of high school? Why did I have to wait until my junior year at Duke University to read that novel? Why did I never read anything but Blue Eyes, which is the book on Black struggle and pain, right? So I think that that's another thing is in the last couple of years is curriculums have started to shift. So they're not just teaching, Black struggle and Black pain and slavery and the slave perspective, but they're now starting to teach, Black excellence and the perspective of W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, and how separate but equal was actually their goal. I mean, not one, it was one, but their goal and how it helps the Black community is investing back into Black-owned businesses and entrepreneurs and stuff like that. I think that that's what we're starting to see happen in this curriculums with these younger, new generations. Like you said, Generation Z, they have different books. They're reading different books. Why was I reading Of Mice and Men? What does Of Mice and Men have to do with my life? Think about it. And yes, you have all these amazing underlying mission statements and things that we're reading in The Great Gatsby, right? How many times I read The Great Gatsby 4 times in high school, 4 times at 2 different schools. I think that we are starting to see more and more is that these young minds can be receptive towards things that are different than what our parents maybe were taught. And I think that's where it starts. I think that's a neat way to expose people to difference. Like the Diary of Anne Frank. we're given the Diary of Anne Frank, but only in like AP English when you're mentally mature enough to read that. Anne Frank wasn't even mentally mature enough to write that. If you really think about it, she was a child.
We have to think about where the curriculum came from.
Well, that goes into a whole nother debate and how people are uncomfortable what things are taught. But it's like, gosh, I wish I could live in a world where I wasn't taught how slavery and the civil rights movement and lynchings and discrimination and bias. I wish I could have been taught that when I turned 20. But instead, I was taught that from my family telling me stories about how family members would only go through the back door because they were always societally structured to go through the back door. Do you know what I mean? Like, why is it that young black minds are taught earlier that I don't think they're mature? You know what I mean? I think that that's just how life is. So I think that we're starting to see more and more the power of education, the power of information. It gives us the opportunity to make difference, right? And gives us the opportunity to expose ourselves to something that's different, to new, to challenge beyond just Martin Luther King, to challenge beyond just Malcolm X, right? To dive into Jay-Z, right? To dive into these successful Black men and women in today's society, right? And then when you get there, then you can shift and be like, all right, let's challenge religion. Let's dive into like, where are religions built? How far back does Judaism go? How far back does Muslim go? Right? Where does it come from? Who was here on America before it all? And how did religion grow and all that? I think that's when you're able to, you ever have a conversation with someone who has taken like a billion classes to get their doctorate, right? Because they took all these different classes. And so they can jump into any conversation because they have exposed themselves to things that they had never seen before. And I think that's what the point of all this is, right? Is to continuously expose yourselves to things that maybe you weren't taught from K through 12, which you should have been, right? The Diary of Anne Frank should only be the entry level. Only entry level. Let's take it further. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, take it further. And even though those are really very traumatic experiences to watch and read, it's important for you to understand the Jewish experience in Europe and then understand the Jewish experience in America, right? So it's just, but it's like we say, we always go back to Generation Z, is they are more willing to have those hard moments to learn more about. And that might be because we're starting to switch and change the curriculum for them. Teach them that there's more, you know? There's more to what you're learning, to what your parents have taught you. It goes beyond that. So, but that's why I say it's bigger than Martin Luther King. It's way bigger. He is literally the one that introduces us to conversations like these.
Yeah, it's just interesting how the sports narrative have really supported that cause. One of my best Christmas presents ever was the Ali Summit, and you have Jim Brown, you have Jim Brown, you have Muhammad Ali, you have Bill Russell, you have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you have, and then in the back you have Willie Davis, some of the greatest athletes at that time, during that time, using their voice, using their platform to talk, to speak to equality. What a beautiful! That's one of the most remarkable presents I've received, because all four, the ones, especially the ones sitting in the front, I grew up, just idolizing them. And not what they stood for.
And we saw this happen again Through who? Colin Kaepernick.
Right.
Through the recent, like in the last 5 to 8 years, the conversation around protesting the national anthem. It's the exact same thing. And it's not, and here's the thing, they didn't choose to not go to war, which it's war, people, it's a pretty big deal. They didn't choose to go to war not because they hate America, not because they wish they lived in Australia, right? That's not what it was. It was using their voices and their decision to shine light on the fact that we live in a country that while we love it, it doesn't exactly love us back. And it doesn't love us back through segregation. It doesn't love us back through discrimination. It doesn't love us back through hate crimes. It doesn't love us back through workplace discrimination. It doesn't love us back through societal financial difference. It doesn't love us back through mass incarceration demographics. It doesn't love us back through how we teach these young children in school about what's happening in actual history. It does not love us back through let me take it, healthcare, medical care provided. It does not, that's just what we're saying, is when you break it down and you see the numbers and what's happening and why Colin Kaepernick would kneel. First of all, he spoke with a soldier and they had a strong conversation with veterans about what's the correct way to protest the national anthem. And it's not protesting because we hate police, right? It's not protesting because we hate veterans. It's not protesting because we hate the flag. No, it's protesting to use your voice, to use your decision, to shine light on the fact that that beautiful flag that we're raised to respect and love does not completely love us back. Right? But it's so hard. And this goes beyond race, Dad. I had a conversation with Shane about this, is that when we're having like debates about, I forgot what we were having a debate about. Oh, I remember what we were having a debate about. It was the Lori Harvey. But what I'm saying is having conversation about how men talk about women in a certain way and women talk about men in a certain way. And there's constantly this men are from Mars, women are from Venus, right? But it's when we're having these conversations, there's a very large amount of people that become defensive in conversations and are unable to actually hear the other side's perspective. And because I heard something today, it said the best way to win an argument is to literally shut up and listen. Because sometimes we're so defensive and we're so thinking about, okay, what's my rebuttal to the first thing they said, that 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D went by, and we didn't even hear that we possibly could have agreed with some of that. And so being able to just shut up and listen, maybe you'll be able to hear something. You'll be able to see a compromise. You'll be able to see an opportunity for you guys to stand on the same level. And I think that that's the biggest thing, but we're unable sometimes as human beings to be able to get beyond the defensiveness part, to get beyond the fact that, oh, they're saying Black Lives Matter, so that means that nobody else's life matter. Nobody said that. And nobody believes that. We're just saying, can you guys like pay attention to us for a second? Right? Can you guys just like help us out a little bit? We don't understand why for 20 years we've struggled to get Keisha in the boardroom because her name is Keisha. We have struggled why corporate America doesn't allow you to wear headscarves. What does that have to do with my job? When it has to do with my culture, right? So there's so much to it that people just want to pull the layers back. We don't want to, like, we're not just speaking on nothing, right? We're speaking on experience. We're speaking on what we've seen, right? And how maybe you can help us in this process. So I think that, like I said, I mean, we've seen great men and women come through history, starting with Martin Luther King, right? Even though it goes way beyond, right? There's always someone before someone. There was someone who sat their butt on the back of that bus before Rosa Parks, right? We all know Rosa Parks actually was a strategic move by the movement, right? They sat there and had that decision. And while she was tired, she did not want to get up. There was an understanding that the moment we make this statement, we're going. Montgomery bus boycott is happening, right? There's always someone before someone, right? And so that's why there always has to continuously be someone before someone. There has to be a Colin Kaepernick in order for them to be a Naomi Osaka. There always has to be a Naomi Osaka. I mean, a Serena Williams that can be a Naomi Osaka. There always has to be that in.
Somebody has to pave the way.
Someone has to pave the way, and they'll be the ones that unfortunately are slaughtered. Because you don't make statements that are always going to be 100% agreed upon by everybody. Like, before we close, let's like really, Donovan Mitchell spoke out about his experience in Utah and how when he was there was a situation where a young girl was bullied so bad because of the color of her skin that she took her own life. She died from suicide. A young girl, right? She didn't know any better. She didn't know that her black is beautiful. She didn't know, right? Even though her mom and dad told her probably, even though she saw these amazing people like Beyonce and Serena Williams and Alicia Keys and all these amazing people for her to look up to, it didn't matter, right? She was bullied on the color of her skin. And when he spoke up on it when he was there, and then when he left, they asked him, what was your experience in Utah? And what do you feel? Let me make sure I pull it up. And what do you feel? And how did you feel? And he said, one of the biggest things he said, it's no secret there's a lot of stuff that I dealt with being in Utah off the floor. If I'm being honest with you, I never really said this, but it was draining. It was draining on my energy because you can't sit in your room and cheer for me and then do all these different things. I'm not saying every fan, but it felt like a certain specific thing. I tried my best to make sure I invited young Black and brown kids to games to be around the community. But to not see us there in the arena, it was definitely tough. And now being in Cleveland, I see us courtside and it's refreshing. And it's like, that Utah's in America. Utah's in America, the melting pot of the world. It's 2023.
Oh.
No, it's 2023, right? And so, like you said in the beginning of the show, are we there yet? No. Are we ever going to be there? No. Is that okay? Yes. Want to know why? Because we're going to continue to grow, right?
Yep.
And I don't think we'll ever, the pendulum, right? When the pendulum swings one way, RGB said this, the first woman Supreme Court Justice from Brooklyn, New York. She said the pendulum swings one way, eventually it's going to swing back, right? And we're going to be hit with all the backlash of the forward movement and happenings that we've done. But hopefully, of course, it'll always have to swing back the other way. And so continuously have hope, continuously using stories like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Muhammad Ali and Serena Williams and Beyonce and Jay-Z, all these amazing stories and people that we have to look up to, using them to provide hope for the next generation to continuously just grind away.
And just don't ever listen to Shut Up and Dribble, ever.
Yeah, I don't even understand that one. I didn't understand. I was like, it doesn't make sense just because they play a sport, like they don't watch the news. They don't read books. Now, do I think LeBron James reads the books from start to finish? I don't. I tell these people all the time, I think he takes the cliff notes. I really do. So did Kyrie. I think they take the cliff notes. But at the end of the day, here's my thing. They picked up the book.
They picked up the book.
And that's all we can do too, is let's try to pick up the book. Let's read the back, let's read the front, and maybe put it on our nightstand, put it in the bathroom, put wherever you are, just try to take a chapter a day of something that's not what you're used to.
Right.
And see what that does. So
right. Well, you don't grow unless you get uncomfortable. Sometimes you have to
in all parts of life.
Right.
But thank you everyone for joining us on this wonderful Martin Luther King Day. And this Monday, as we start a new week, take it easy today. Find a way to involve yourself into something, like we said, that's uncomfortable and new. Social media has a lot of amazing things out there right now that are resources for that. Again, this is Faith Family Focus. We use our faith as a vehicle to help us heal and sustain others and strengthen their own family core. And of course,
let go, let God. Let go, let faith, and let go, let love.
Everyone have a wonderful week. We'll see you again soon.